Hey, this is Taylor from KBFoamStrike, and today I'm going to teach you how to add sound effects to any blaster. Alright, so for the first step of this tutorial, we're going to need ourselves a blaster. In this case, I'm going to be using good old Flywheel Stryfe. And we got the screws out already, and we're going to just go ahead and gut everything because for this one, I'm going to end up painting it a special color. But there's a couple of pieces we're going to need out of here. We got these couple of switches right here, and that one in particular, where the magazine goes in, we're going to need that for the mod. So make sure you keep that. If you'd like to skip to the electronics tutorial, go ahead and click on that chapter below. But we're going to go ahead and continue on with this paint job. And here I'm sanding it and then just getting all the shine off of it and then taking it under the spigot to get all the dust off. That's really going to help with the paint adhering to the plastic by having a nice coat and some roughness for it to really stick to and bond. After we got all that dust rinsed off, we got it nice and sanded. We're just going to go ahead and hit it with a couple of coats of some rattle cans. We got some Krylon. We got a couple of Rust-Oleums. Just, you know, whatever flavor you're feeling, have fun with it and make it your own. After masking off and getting a couple of different layers of color, we're going to go ahead and hit it with this green, pink, and then underneath we have it blacked out. And then once that's done, we're going to take it in here and get a nice little pinstripe going on. All right, full paint job is complete, and I gotta say I'm pretty happy with it. Had to do a little bit of touch-up work with the brush. Then I got the Raider stock with the matching pink and the black, and then we got the green with the orange tip still. And yeah, now we're just gonna go ahead and we're gonna hit everything with this semi-gloss clear coat. All right, so in this step, we're gonna show you how I'm gonna take this Raider stock and I'm gonna integrate the battery into it. But what we have to do right here is we need to drill a hole to feed the wires into this part so that it can plug into the Stryfe. And in order to pad it out, we're just going to be using some cheapo sponges that we found. We got this 8-pack from the Dollar Tree, 8 for $1. You can just cut them up and then you got a nice little piece of foam that'll keep your battery intact. I'm going to be using a 1/2-inch spade drill bit right here. It comes with a bunch of them and it's going to cut a nice little perfect hole. I'm just trying to make it big enough so that the XT60 connector can fit through. All right, we're through. All right, make it easier. We're gonna just use a little bit of masking tape and we're gonna put it on the lead right here so that we have a uniform cable to pull right through. So I'm just gonna do that. And then we're gonna feed it through our hole like such. And bada boom, we're out through the other side. So yeah, that'll still plug in perfectly and we can charge it anytime we need. Now I'm just gonna stuff the sponge down in here, button it up, it's good to go. So you can get this done with just one sponge, just chop it up a couple of times and pat it out real nice. All right, so here's everything we're gonna need to get the sound effects going on. We will be needing to keep this switch from our Stryfe. It is the one that has all 3 leads on it. The middle one is gonna be your ground. And then the other will interact with the sound effect whenever the switch is pushed, and then the other will hit the track whenever it's released. So the way that that works is you put the magazine in, the switch is pressed, it plays that sound. Next time you take out the magazine, switch gets depressed, and then that track will play. And then we're also going to be adding in a rocker switch so you can have different individual sounds. So for instance, I'm going to be using a theme song. You could do anything, it doesn't matter. The little soundboard, you can put up to 8 megabytes on this version. There's also another version that I'll link that takes an SD card, and then that you can add anything you want, as many songs as you want. But for this purpose of this build, I'm only going to be using 4 tracks, so 8 megabytes on a built-in board. that's gonna be plenty for me, and I don't have to worry about buying an extra SD card. So for the same thing on this switch, that's a COM, so your ground, it's gonna be connected as well, the same switch, all the same line, and I'm gonna be using a black wire over here to keep it all in line. And then same principle, one switch is for one track, and then the other is for the other. Let's go ahead and open this up. So down here is where you will solder in your 5 volts. And in order to not blow it up, because we're gonna be using 7 to 8 volts from a LiPo, we will be using a voltage converter. The principle here is it takes voltage in, and then you can tweak it using a multimeter to get a certain value output. So I will be showing that in just a moment. This interface is through USB, so you can plug it in and then put your MP3s on. It just shows up like a flash drive. And then also on the interface of this, these pins down here is where you will be soldering in your switches. So each one correlates to a different track. If you look at the user manual of this, it's pretty simple, but I'll also have a diagram to show how I did it. It goes track 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way down the line. It's also labeled on the back here. And if you want, technically it's an MP3 player. There's a way to hook in headphones, but what I'll be doing and what I would suggest as well is buying an independent speaker, and then that can be soldered on right here. It only takes up to, I believe, 4 ohms and 3 to 5 watts. This one's a 4 ohm, 3 watt speaker. As far as going into the Stryfe, I'm gonna attempt to put it here under the jam door. Hopefully that works. If not, I'm gonna end up buying another speaker. So we'll see if that works out or not. And then finally, this right here controls your volume. So you can just put in a Phillips head, and once you have a track playing, you can just turn that and get it to the dedicated volume that you wanna hear. All right, so let's go ahead and get our voltmeter going. So I'm gonna attach my leads and getting 8.5 volts. This is a slightly used battery, so that's pretty normal right there, 8.5. All right, here we have the voltage converter. It's very, very tiny. Right here is a potentiometer that we'll be using to determine the voltage that we want. I'm just gonna be using some alligator clamps and then hooking them up to the 9 volt and then putting my leads of my multimeter in order to see what the voltage is. So on the back of it, it says labeled in and out. So right now in, we are gonna want to go ahead and hook up our clamps to it. So right here it says in positive. So I'll hook up a clamp. In negative right there. So then this right here is our positive. And hook up our negative. All right, so we got voltage coming in. It's reading 8.49. So basically 8.5 like it was earlier. All right, so we have the 9 volt battery. We got an alligator clamped, and it's going input into the voltage converter. Now we're gonna take our leads and we're gonna check to see what voltage we're getting. Oh, look at that, it's already stepping down. All right, so what you would do is you just take your screwdriver and then you start turning this potentiometer until you get the value that you're looking for. I'm looking for 5 volts, so I'm gonna turn it a little bit to get it lower. It's going a little too funky. 5.3. So yeah, it's as simple as that. You just take the screwdriver and you just turn it until you start to get the voltage that you want, and then you just leave it at that and it should be good to go. It's very, very touchy though, so just be patient with it and keep turning it until you get the voltage that you're looking for. This is from an older project that I built, and then I ended up having an extra one, so I just went ahead and wired it up. But this is the same concept. It inputs voltage. This one I think takes up to 40 volts in, which is ridiculous. That's why it's so beefy. I'm gonna be going with this one. It'll still fit in my build, and as you can see, I've already got it into the voltmeter, and it's nice and tuned to 5 volts. So it's taking that 9 volt battery, which is like 8.5, 8.6, and it's stepping it down to the 5 volts that we'll be needing for MP3 player. Moving on, we got ourselves the wiring diagram here. Feel free to screenshot or pause the video, whatever you gotta do. But essentially, it's a typical Stryfe setup. We got the positive running on one side of the motors, and that runs into the normally open of the rev trigger. and then that breaks off from the COM port of the rev trigger, goes up to your XT60 connector, and that'll split off as well. So make sure you split the positive off of that, and then you will be inputting that into your voltage converter, also known as a buck. That'll go inside of the input, and then same thing, you'll have the negative running off of the motors. It'll go straight to the XT60 negative, and that'll also split off into the buck. So whenever you plug your battery into the XT60, it's providing power into the motor as well as into the buck. Now then, once you have the buck tuned into the 5 volts, that'll be outputting its power and going straight into the MP3 player. And from the MP3 player, you will be wiring off some switches. The only other thing you'll have to wire up on the MP3 player will be your speaker. So there's a specific way that you need to wire in these switches, otherwise they won't play back properly. Now you're probably wondering, how do I get these files on here? How do I name them and all that? Well, let's go ahead and head onto the computer and check that out. Here we are on the PC, and I'm using Windows for this one, but you can also use a Mac or Linux, but you're gonna need this software right here called Audacity. Just go ahead and Google search it, it's free software, and it's gonna let you manipulate and export audio files. So that is one of the sound effects I'll be using for one of my switches. And as you can see, it's only 5 seconds long, but the way that this MP3 player works is it just automatically keeps looping. So we're gonna need to take that file of 5 seconds and we're gonna need to drag it out and generate some silence to it. So we're gonna open up Audacity. We can just go ahead and drag in our clip right here. And as you can see, it's about 5 seconds. But in order to make it not loop as fast and to have the silence, we're gonna be clicking on first the magnifying glass and just right click a couple of times and that'll zoom out for you. And now I can see the timeline is past 2 minutes. Then we click right here and just drag all the way out. You can do 2 minutes, 5 minutes, however long of the silence you want, but make sure it's lit up blue like this. Then you're gonna go up here and click on generate and generate silence. It's gonna ask you, hey, is that how long you want it to be? Just click OK. Boom, now your track is 2 minutes long, and right down here you can see the duration as well, so a little over 2 minutes. After that, we're gonna go up here and go ahead and click on File, Export, and export it as an MP3. For this one, I'm using the 8 megabyte version of the MP3 board, but if you're using a flash drive, you know, you can do whatever, but by default, it's set to preset, standard, and joint stereo, but we're gonna change that up to a constant bit rate of 64 kilobits per second, and we're gonna force it to export mono. But since I'm using a smaller drive, I'm gonna use a little bit of a smaller bit rate, but the quality change isn't really gonna be that different since we're just running it on just one little speaker. After that, we're gonna rename the file, and I'm gonna add 2 minutes to the title so that I know what version that is. And for now, we'll just go ahead and save it to our desktop so it's easy to find. Just click OK right here. And bada boom, there it popped up on the desktop. All right, now we're done with Audacity, but you're gonna wanna repeat that process for every track that you have, unless you just want it to be a song, then you can leave it as is. But now you can hear it, it's still playing that 5 seconds, but there's a bunch of silence. So whenever the MP3 player tries to loop this track, it won't keep saying it over and over and over again. After that, we got our MP3 player over here. We can drag and drop our 2 minute one over here, and then if you are ready to rename it, you can just click right here, right click and choose rename. And then for this one, you can just put 0000, and then you need to follow it up with which one, 2, 4, 6, or 8. For this one, it's gonna be track number 6, but I labeled it 2 here. Whatever track it is, just follow the chart. You have to name them as this, otherwise the file will not play. So that's the most important part, is you have to rename them these numbers, otherwise it will not work. So here's a reference chart of how all the switches and tracks need to be labeled. If you're using a jam door switch, that needs to be track 00001. If you're using a rocker switch with 2 positions, those will be tracks 2 and 4. And no matter what, if you're doing the mag switches, those need to be 6 and 8. Make sure you have the same dip switch settings that I do. It's a little box there with 1, 2, and 3 that's lit up red. You're gonna want switch 2 to the right and 1 and 3 on the left. And then the wires that I have soldered there, you can match those up with the same points. Those are gonna be the same pins that you wanna do. The very bottom one is IO7, that's track 8. IO5 is track 6. IO3 is track 4. And IO1 is track 2. And then you'll just daisy chain everything to the same ground there at the bottom underneath the busy signal. And then you'll put your voltage in from your buck at the top with that ground and that 5 volts. Now that I got all the electronics done with the MP3 player and all the software set up, and I'm going to be using a battery stock, I'm going to be putting all my electronics and my voltage converter inside of the original battery holder for the Stryfe. So just taking my Dremel, taking some snippers, clearing that out, and everything's going to sit in there nice. Time to get this switch mounted in here, and I'm going to be taking some small drill bits and just slowly, gradually stepping them up to get the hole the right size. Be patient with this, go slow, and if you need to, just use a file and just keep test fitting that switch because you don't want the hole to be too big. All right, got the switch in there. We can see down there that the pusher will not interfere with it. And shell closes up nice and clicky. Now it's time to finish up wiring the electronic board into here. I went ahead and off camera, I just did the typical motor setup. I got Michelle 2.0s inside of a 42mm cage. I got worker high crush wheels, so this is going to be hitting a little bit harder than I originally intended. And for this build, I used one of those out of darts. I don't know if you can see it, but the out of dart spanner boards. So it made soldering much easier. Let's go ahead and get all the rest of this wired up electronics, and then I'm going to be putting a little 3D printed logo that I found. I'm going to glue that onto the battery door. I have these little logos that I 3D printed. I got 2 of them. I'm going to end up planting them right here and one on the battery door like such with some super glue. In Cura, I used a method to pause the printer so that I could do a base color of green PLA, and then the printer stopped, and then I fed black into it so that it comes out with 2 tones and it makes the logo pop a little bit better. It's really cool and is much easier than having to, paint it afterwards, and it's already ready to go. All right, gonna finish that up, and we got the glue on there. Now it's time to solder up the electronics. I got the XT60 connector, and as you can see, I have split the 2 wires, and then I soldered them together and added some heat shrink, and then I connect that into an XT60 connector that will be going into the out of dart spanner board. And then we're going to be adding that split off to the buck here, to the input of that. And then we're going to add ourselves another XT60 connector that will be used to connect the battery into this whole monstrosity. We got everything soldered up. We got the buck converter so far. We got the voltage going in. I still need to wire up the voltage going out to the MP3 player, but I'll do that in a moment. Right now, I just want to see if everything is working out good. I've got the XT60 for the battery that goes right here, and then that breaks off to the buck as well as the COM port of the switch. So whenever I push that, then it'll send electricity through here into the positive. The negative is also splitting to the buck from the negative of the battery as well as into the motors. And then these should rev up, and that should light up red as long as everything is good. So let's test it out. I went ahead and pre-tested with a 9 volt and everything seemed fine, so I'm going to the LiPo now. All right, that's a good sign. We got the red LED. Let's see if we get some revs. Woo, yeah, buddy. All right, I got a couple of darts here and this little magazine. Let's see if we can get them to fire out. So I'm going to start with putting on the speaker, and then I will be doing the ground. I have a daisy chain here of black wire with these little connectors. It's very useful. And then we'll just be putting each switch into their correlating IO port, and then it's time to test it. All right, moment of truth. We got it all soldered up, and we're gonna go ahead and plug in our LiPo. As soon as I do it, it should play one of the sound effects, so we shall see. All right, and then let's test these out. All right, let's button it up and see how it runs. Woo! Few finishing touches here. I'm gonna hot glue in my rocker switch, and then I'm gonna channel out a little space for the wires for the XT60 connector so that I can plug in my battery stock. I'm also going to include this little battery tray cover that I found on Thingiverse to glue it in and protect all the electronics that are going in the battery tray. Just a little additional shell cutting needed to get the board to fit in, and then I'm going to be using the packaging of anti-static bag that it came with to wrap it up in and tape it down. All right, first firing demo, let's see how it works. Oh yeah, you gotta love it. All right, let's go to the chronograph and see how hard this thing's hitting. For this test, I'm gonna be flinging 12 brand new unopened Adventure Force waffle darts through this bad boy. And so far, I'm seeing some numbers in the 150s and 160s. That's way better than I was anticipating. And yeah, this thing definitely delivering the hits. So after 12 fresh shots, we got ourselves an average of 159.25 with a low of 148 and a high of 166. Let's go hit the field and see how this thing performs. Gotcha, Garrett! On your right! Gotcha, Garrett!
Gotcha.
Reloading!
Jimmy Dog, go.
Gotcha!
Gotcha.
Gotcha, Garrett! Thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and like, share, comment, subscribe if you want. Be sure to check the description for the links below that'll have all the parts that you'll need to make this build possible. If you'd like to see this blaster in more action, be sure to click on that playlist above. And if you want to check out some of my thrifting adventures, click on that one. Thanks again, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.